I'm Bob Bolton from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and this is Alaska Voices, a place for communities to connect through conversation in order to build a better tomorrow for Alaskans and the world.
Originally, I grew up in Gakona, Alaska,
Tyonek,
Egypt,
Idaho,
Rampart,
St. Lawrence Island,
St. Paul.
And I'm here with my student,
my science buddy,
my teacher,
my homie.
I'm his daughter.
My name is John Walsh. My age is 69, and my relationship to Larry Hinsman is that I work in one of the research institutes over which he is the vice chancellor.
So my name is Larry Hinsman. I'm 62 years old. We're at the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, and John and I are colleagues. So the evolution of climate science has changed a lot over the period of your career. You know, what have you seen with respect to changes, not just in changes in climate, but changes with respect to how people are receptive to climate science?
For the most part, climate and climate change were non-issues back in the 1960s and 1970s. People were generally concerned about the weather. They didn't think too much about climate. One series of events that did generate some interest in the public, at least in the lower 48, was a series of fairly severe winters back in the 1970s. There were 3 or 4 winters in a row that were snowy and cold. So there was some concern at that time that we might actually be moving towards an ice age. That concern seemed to wane over the next decade or so when the winters returned to normal, but that was, in a sense, a wake-up call for people that there's more to the atmosphere and ocean system than just day-to-day weather variations.
There's multiple audiences that have various concerns about climate. There's the general public, there's the agency program managers, and there's the political realm. How would you describe the changes in those audiences over the years, their perceptions and their level of interest, their engagement?
I think that from the higher levels of the administration and from the congressional side, there was very little interest in climate in the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s. It was just not one of the topics that the legislators were hearing from their constituents about.
So how would you describe it today?
I think today we've certainly seen a surge of interest. That's paralleled the growth of the climate research enterprise, both in the private and the academic sectors. I think that may have peaked a couple of years ago in terms of the enthusiasm and support from the higher political levels, the administration in particular. There's still basically an army of climate researchers. They may be having harder times right now, but their voices are still being heard, and they'll probably get through to the higher levels of government sometime down the road.
Do you have any projections on what we should expect with respect to environmental impacts or ecosystem dynamics within the near future?
I think the big threats to ecosystems have to do with moisture, droughts, and floods, I think, are the particular climate events that I'd be most concerned about. I think we're already seeing impacts of drought in the lower 48, and the extreme flooding, the opposite side of the coin. The extreme flood events are certainly ones that have been high profile. They've been in the news a lot. Do you see any surprises that stand out, things you might not have expected to see in your research career when you started back in the 1980s?
Frankly, what astounds me completely is the level of denial by some portions of our population and some people in the political realm. Incredible amount of evidence out there that the climate is indeed changes, and there are drastic consequences of those changes. As you mentioned, the droughts and the floods are going to be a serious consequence, but also the degradation of permafrost in the Arctic is going to be a really drastic impact upon our northern societies. We have a huge amount of our infrastructure is built upon this ice-rich permafrost, and when the ice melts and the permafrost thaws and the ice-rich soils start to subside and erode, we're going to have drastic impacts to our northern infrastructure. I also worry about sustaining agriculture in the Midwest. We have huge population centers that demand a huge amount of water, and when the hydrologic dynamics change and we can no longer provide waters to these megacities, there will be important demographic impacts because of that.
Do you think the denial is driven largely by financial considerations? In other words, if certain industries or certain people think that climate change is going to cost them money down the road for mitigation measures, do you think that's the reason for the denial, or is there something deeper at work?
I think that financial considerations are a big part of it, but I also think that people really prefer to have a static, stable environment, and I think a lot of people just would prefer to pretend that there are no changes and pretend to ignore the situation and hope it goes away. People have evolved over the millennium to respond to the snake in the grass and not to the slow press and to the slow changes that we see with respect to climate dynamics or changes that occur on semi-geologic timeframes.
I think part of the problem, too, is that climate is interlinked with weather, and that introduces these ups and downs into the system.
So how do you answer people when they say, well, the climate is always changing and always has changed?
Well, I just point out that what we're experiencing now is outside of the range of a lot of the changes that we've experienced. If you look at a record of temperatures going back thousands of years, there are indeed ups and downs along the way, but we're now outside the range of those temperatures of the past couple thousand years. If you actually look at the numbers and calculate how much the solar radiation should be changing or is changing because of the orbital cycles, it turns out to be a few tenths of a watt per square meter in the radiation units. On the other hand, if you calculate what greenhouse gases have done to the atmosphere over the last 100 years or so, it's more than 10 times as much in terms of a radiative forcing or a change in radiation in the opposite direction.
So let's shift tracks a little bit. You've studied climate dynamics for 50 years, and the Arctic in particular. So what do you think, how can you explain the role of the Arctic in global climate dynamics?
We're not really exaggerating when we say the Arctic is the bellwether when it comes to climate change. And those changes actually play back. They feed back into the larger climate system. You have the sea ice, the snow cover, even the ice sheets, which can amplify or magnify some of the changes that might be happening otherwise. They even have a name for that effect, which is Arctic amplification. That carries over into elements of climate and weather other than temperature. It carries over into precipitation. You're opening up more water to provide more moisture. You're releasing more water into the ocean, which can in turn affect what happens in the upper ocean, affecting the ecosystems and the ice cover itself. So I look at the Arctic as a part of the system where the leverage is greater than it is in middle latitudes.
So in the Arctic, we're experiencing thawing permafrost and degrading glaciers and coastal erosion and changing vegetation. So what impacts can they expect in the lower 48?
I think that the two big ones that I'd be concerned about are changes in sea level, which can be made more rapid and worse by what happens in the Arctic, especially with Greenland and the smaller glaciers, and the impacts of the Arctic on mid-latitude weather systems. The climate people are now pointing to actual mechanisms that can link the warmer Arctic with winter weather like we've experienced in the U.S. and in Europe. And these mechanisms can in some way be the smoking gun. They take the connection beyond a statistical relationship into one that makes good sense physically and dynamically. So we're essentially completing the story of the link. And to the extent that the Arctic continues to change, those linkages to mid-latitudes are going to continue and perhaps become stronger in the future.
Alaska Voices builds bridges by creating a space where community members, friends, policymakers, and scientists can share stories and place-based knowledge. This project was developed in partnership with StoryCorps and was funded by the Alaska Climate Adaptation Science Center. Additional funding was provided by the University of Alaska Fairbanks Chancellor through a generous gift from the Bentley Family Trust. Alaska Voices would not be possible without the help and efforts of an amazing group of people. Our producer and audio engineer is Kelsey Skonberg of Mossy Stone Media. Our podcast and outreach specialist is Michael Delu, and our website designer is Carolyn Rosner. If you are interested in more conversations or information, please visit our website at alaskavoices.org.